Welcome back to the Money Blueprint podcast. Season 1 has officially come to a wrap, and we wanted to thank everyone who listened, watched, shared, and supported us throughout the season. For this special episode, we're bringing back some of the best questions we received from you, our audience, and revisiting some of the conversations they sparked throughout Season 1. Let's start with the everyday realities of balancing responsibilities and managing your money, from family responsibilities to the financial decisions we have to make every day. Here are some of the questions you asked. Second question from Brian, 31, and living in Kigali. I'm the firstborn and my parents depend on me financially. School fees, medical bills, emergencies, it's always something. I want to invest and build something for myself, but I also feel guilty saying no. How do you balance responsibility and personal growth?
I like the second question from Brian. It ties in perfectly to what we've been discussing today. It's a great question, and it's also a reality that many firstborns live with. They have this guilt if they succeed, or if they've achieved some level of success, that they are responsible for the rest of the family because of the firstborn. Now, some of that holds true. It is a reality that you are first in line, and so you are ahead of everybody else. But herein describes the issue of unstructured spending. What Brian is dealing with is the guilt of wanting to build something for his own future, for the future of his immediate family, his wife and kids at some point. That is competing with the current needs of his extended family, his siblings, his parents, maybe even more extended than that. If Brian doesn't structure how much he's going to set aside for his family, he needs to be able to live inside his income, Brian. Otherwise, helping other people is just a ticking time bomb, because Brian is not taking care of what he needs to take care. He's not taking care of himself. He's not taking care of his immediate family. So he's not going to be able to support his extended family for long if he doesn't live inside his means. So number one, whatever he's earning, his life and his support to extended family needs to exist within his income. That's number one. If he has any debts, he needs to take care of those debts because that money isn't his. If he has immediate needs, which we all do, like paying for his rent, paying his kids' school fees, paying his needs budget, he has to take care of that. Saving some money for emergencies, saving to invest, those all exist within needs. And the general rule of thumb is that when you're paying your rent or your mortgage, it's inside 30% of your income in order for your rent expense to be sustainable. But there are other things he has to pay for in order for him and his family to survive. And if his extended family are relying on him, he has to survive first, of course. So he needs to have those in order. Money taken care for debts, knowing that he has to live inside his income, amount of money set aside for his needs, like his housing cost, his transport costs to and back from work, his communication costs, his emergencies, his saving and investment funds, food at home, electricity, water. These things need to be managed. Now, what's remaining may be an amount of money that would be set aside for having fun with his wife or with his kids, with his family, going on holidays. Some of that money is going to be held back in order for him to support his extended family members. That could be an additional 5, 10, 15% of his income as well, depending on how much he's earning and how much of his monthly income is spent on what he needs. Because if you follow this structure with your money, first of all, you know you're not going to run out. You're not going to put yourself in a crisis, Brian, in order to support your family by overextending how much money you spend on your day-to-day life. And you're going to be around. You're going to be building something that can sustain you and potentially people who rely on you, because you have assets that are coming from your investing and from your emergency funds. So that's how I'd say Brian can deal with this balance between providing for himself and his family, his immediate family, and then providing for his needs of extended family, as we discussed in this episode.
We have our last question from Dr. Emmanuel from Kampala, a medical doctor and father of 3. Listening to the podcast made me uncomfortable because I realized how much money disappears through convenience spending in my household. Since my wife and I are both busy professionals, we often choose the easier option. Takeout food, quick shopping decisions, subscription services we barely use, frequent small transactions that save time but probably cost us a lot over the year. Individually, the amounts seem small, but together I suspect they're preventing us from investing more aggressively for the future. My question is, how should a busy family realistically approach controlling these small daily expenses without becoming extreme or miserable about money?
Yeah, wow. Dr. Emmanuel, thank you for sending that message in from Kampala. Look, this is always going to be a tough conversation internally and with your partner. It probably would be a tough conversation with your kids too when they get used to effectively, eating out, making quick snapshot shopping decisions, paying for subscription services for distraction or either to distract yourself or distract your children when you're too busy. Or just one thing that we've experienced in my household with our kids is just obviously, as any busy parent would agree, having a few moments just to sit down somewhere and take a load off all the obligations and the pressures that you're dealing with every day. Just taking a minute, having your kids sit down and watch something or listen to something or being distracted by something while you take a breather. This is an extremely emotional situation and question to ask. It's not going to be a one size fits all. It does come back to planning to some degree. The better our plans are, the more automatic our behavior can become, right? And what I mean is if we have structured exactly how we want to manage what the kids eat, when they eat, what quality of food they eat, what we shop for, when we shop, what we are buying, what we are not buying. When these structures become planned, then we can lean into automatic behavior. When we go to the shop every Wednesday evening, every Friday, every Monday, we buy 1, 2, 3, and we don't buy 4, 5, 6 because of these decisions. When our kids are eager for something, they want, our kids, obviously, our young children, we've been working to train them not to crave sweets because of all the damage sweets can do, sugar can do to a developing mind, to a developing body, even a developed one, right? Sugar, which is not in control. Sugar is a very good example of money, right? A correlation. The sugar or the money which isn't under control, which isn't measured and given in healthy moderation, it can easily spoil the system, right? And so this goes for your money, Dr. Emmanuel, and it also goes for sugar that we give our kids, the money we give our kids, the sugar we give our kids. If we give our kids too much money, if we throw money at problems because we're tired, and I totally get it. I don't want it to seem like this is not a real problem that many professionals experience. We make snapshot financial decisions when we are tired, when we're fatigued, when we're under high pressure. We want to solve the problem quickly, and one way to solve the problem is just throw money at the problem. But usually that creates new problems, and it's clear that you've identified this reality that throwing money at a problem creates new problems. The quicker you order how you're going to spend on these particular issues, and the quicker that you have a family discussion, if necessary, with your spouse, with your kids about these changes and the reasons why these changes are critical, the quicker you can set into new habits with your money that allows you to cope with your stressful situations, following a plan, not making decisions each moment. I've mentioned it before on the podcast. When we make decisions in the moment, we get tired by constantly doing that. So when you make a decision in the beginning of the month or the beginning of a circumstance and say, in these situations, this is what we do, then you remove the need to make a decision every time you find yourself in that circumstance. You've already given yourself a preset instruction on what to do. When I'm tired and we have to shop, regardless of how I feel, this is what we buy. This is the list. When my kids are asking me for this, regardless of the situation, regardless of how I'm feeling, this is what we buy and it's what we don't buy. When it comes to snacks, when it comes to toys, when it comes to gifts for others, this is how we manage these situations. It allows you to free up your mental energy by not having to make these decisions on the spot each time they come up. I really hope that helps because that's the way we deal with it and it works wonderfully for us. Excellent question, Dr. Mann, and good luck to you and your spouse with your family making these habit formation changes in your home.
We have our first question from Alice, a human resources manager in Kigali. Every year I tell myself I'll start investing after I've finished paying for something important. First it was a wedding, then a home renovation, now it's my children's school fees. There always seems to be another reason to wait. How do you know when it's genuinely the wrong time to invest and when you're simply using life as an excuse?
Yeah, Alice, this is an excellent question. And I'm pretty sure it's a question that almost everybody who's listening in has. One thing that's so interesting about our the reasons that we have to delay investing is that they're all so common life events. A wedding, like you'd mentioned, school fees for the kids, a crisis in the home. And look, it is true there is a wrong time to try to start investing. And that wrong time is when you're not meeting the basic needs, the living costs of your household. Of course, that can also be an excuse if you have living costs, bare minimum needs, expenses that are inflated. So what I mean is often when we get promotions, when we get a raise or any kind of increase in pay, often what happens when we don't have a spending culture, we don't have a structure about the way we use our money each month. What normally happens when we get extra money is that we just spend more, right? We live a bigger life. We move to a more expensive neighborhood. We buy a more expensive car. We take a larger loan. We just spend more money when we earn more, instead of thinking about how we could invest more money in order for us to have more income streams. So there are wrong times to invest, but usually that's not the reason. The reasons that people give is not the real reason why we should wait before investing. What I would suggest is that the real reason to not invest is that you don't earn a livable wage. Your income is not sufficient for your day-to-day expenses. And by day-to-day, I mean survival expenses, right? Food, water, shelter, clothing, access to your workplace. These are the bare minimums that are required for you to function, to survive in society. But going out to eat, holidays, online subscriptions to like your Spotify's. I'm not putting down any online subscription, but these are not basic human needs. These are privileges, benefits, desires. And when we confuse those two things, then we're never going to be in a place to invest. The funny thing about that observation is that, the thing that truly pulls us out of financial vulnerability is our ability to own or control assets that generate money. Own or control them. Because you see, your job isn't yours. You don't own it unless you're self-employed. And so you're replaceable where you work, unless, of course, it's your company. You don't own that job. You are employed in that job. You have a contract at that job, but that job doesn't belong to you. And it's not under your control. You're trading your time for money. And while that is a necessary function, trading our time and skills for money, that isn't permanently yours. Your kids are not going to inherit your job. All right? If you're no longer capable of executing the value needed at your job, you're not going to continue getting paid. for the work that you've done historically at that job, even if that historical work is 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years. Because the job is an exchange of time and skill for a paycheck. Now, what makes us less vulnerable, financially speaking, is when we own things that generate money or we have control over them. Because that money now you can start using the money that these assets generate to feed your lifestyle and to protect you and your loved ones, financially speaking. So, what is a genuine excuse? A genuine excuse is that you are disordered with your finances, so you can't be consistent as an investor. That is something that's a genuine problem that you can fix. You should fix before you invest. And the other thing is that you just don't earn a livable wage. So you don't earn enough to feed yourself and those who you're responsible for, to shelter them, to clothe them, to maintain the bare minimum standards of life. You're not in that position yet, which again, there's no shame, but that's the situation that you're in. We have to be pragmatic when it comes to our money. If that's the case, then you need to change your circumstances first before you start investing. We need to increase how we earn and improve how we control and contain our spending before we learn how to invest. Otherwise, investing is either impossible because you don't earn enough to invest, or it's impossible to maintain because you're disordered with your spending culture. So those are the two reasons I'd give. And both of those, at least the spending culture, can be fixed inside a few hours with the right guidance. The earning enough for a livable wage is another story. That's a difficult circumstance. So Alice, that's what I would say. If you could fix your spending culture, most likely you put yourself in a position to start investing, and everything else is just an excuse. Thank you for that question.
Last question from Esther, working in a bank in Kigali. My biggest fear isn't losing money. It's making the wrong decision and disappointing my family. Sometimes I delay making any financial move because I feel the responsibility of getting it right is so heavy. How do you make important financial decisions when you're afraid of making mistakes that could affect the people who depend on you?
This is a big one. Thank you for this question. Very, very, very. I would imagine, not I imagine, even my experience with the people I've worked with, this is a common, deep concern, especially with the East Africans that I've worked with who see themselves as or have been designated by their family as the one who has, air quote, made it, the one who's responsible, the one that we rely on, that firstborn. If you are a firstborn, that person who takes on responsibility in the family. This is hard because there's a lot of deep emotional ties, psychological ties to this responsibility that everything is on my shoulders. If I fail, it's not just me who fails, the whole family fails. I'm holding lives in my hand with my decisions. It makes the stakes so much higher. I don't want to use the word unfair because I mean, what is fairness to begin with? But I think that the first thing that we want to do, again, I won't suggest, Esther, I won't suggest that this is a simple problem to solve because I know that it is not. But what I would suggest, the first thing to do is to figure what your real tethers are and the ones which are not real, the ones that are just in our minds. And by tether, I mean the things that are holding us back. What are real? What responsibilities are we holding on to that are real and true and that we should hold on to them? And what are responsibilities or barriers or tethers, things holding us back that are in our minds? We have a culture in our region, on our continent, generally speaking. We're not the only ones. Where I am because we are, or we're collectivistic. That means that you carry responsibilities beyond just yourself. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just a way of seeing life, a way of living. I'd suggest the first thing that we want to think through in this circumstance is, who am I responsible for? Really? Who am I responsible for? I'm responsible for giving back to my parents. They need my help. Responsible for contributing to my siblings in one form or the other, advising them, guiding them, being an example to them. I'm responsible for to a lesser degree, I'm responsible for the people in my environment, my village, so to speak. But how much are you going to price of what resources you have? How much are you going to dedicate towards those responsibilities? Because even that is a responsibility. If you're going to be a good steward of your resources, a good manager of your own funds, you have to make hard decisions about how much you're dedicating to responsibilities. I have 3 kids, 3 children, and I'm responsible for their education. I'm responsible for their entire lives, along with their mother. But just because I'm responsible for their education, should I spend my entire paycheck on their school fees? Is that the only education that they can get is what they learn at school? How much of their education am I invested in personally, helping them develop as human beings? The same question sets in your position, Esther, because they might not be your children, they might be your siblings, they might be your parents, they might be your clan members, so to speak. But even then, what percentage of your income are you dedicating to resolving that problem? The problems that they're experiencing, the problems that they're experiencing, the needs they have of you. And how much of your efforts and energies are dedicated towards helping them become self-reliant? Because what happens when you are no longer there? What happens to them? Our collectivist cultures need to include the necessary function of helping people who rely on us to rely on us less. Helping people who rely on you less. That is helping them. Because when you're no longer there, when somebody to help them is no longer there, what happens to them? When they have people relying on them, what will they do? Because they're not in a position to rely on themselves. Now, this is true at degrees, depending on whom we're talking about. If it's your parents, it's different from if it's your siblings, which is different if it's your kids, which is different if it is your clan's members, again, so to speak. But that conversation will liberate you from a lot of fear when you frame it that way. And then the reason why I spend time reflecting on that is because then the weight of your individual decisions becomes less. It stops being about you making perfect choices with every coin you have and starts being about, how do I support within this bandwidth of what I'm capable, and how much is the people around me that I'm supporting, how much is it on them to carry themselves? And that is a very individualized, personal, subjective conversation, but maybe where to begin talking about this and resolving. I hope that helps, Esther. I know that there is no one size fits all for these kinds of questions about our collectivist responsibilities and whether we should have these kinds of responsibilities, these kinds of feelings. But then again, like I said earlier, what is fairness? What is that thing?
We have our second question from Daniel, working in an NGO in Nairobi. I try to plan my finances, but there always seems to be something unexpected. A family member needs medical treatment, someone loses their job, school fees comes up, or another urgent situation requires financial support. I sometimes feel as if I'm trying to build my own financial future while carrying the financial problems of several other people. How do you prepare for unexpected financial shocks without neglecting the family members who genuinely depend on you?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question too. We all have, especially in our different contexts, we have our family responsibilities, and unexpected expenses will always show up. I think the statistic is that is it 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 years, each family should expect some kind of financial shock. So if you haven't experienced a financial shock in the last 8 to 10 years, then you're overdue. 8 to 12, I think it is. Right? So we're all subject to financial shocks, to unexpected expenses, to things, life happening, right? and responsibilities to our families at varying degrees. But that can also be built into the way you structure your spending. Allocate, make a certain amount of money that you've set aside. This is for family support. And anything beyond this starts eating into other priorities, which is, by the way, these are things that organizations do. This is not impossible. It might sound intimidating. It might sound difficult to do because saying no and saying not yet, not right now to family members can seem daunting, especially in our African context or collectivist, not just Africans, collectivist contexts, collectivist cultures. It might seem like a very difficult thing to say no or not yet to clans members, family members, people who are close to you, friends. But if we're going to be responsible stewards of our money, if we're going to build towards actual goals, then our resources need to be dedicated to those goals. Some of those goals can definitely be supporting my family, supporting my friends, supporting my community. How much are you allocating to that? And can you be consistent about that allocation? And can you be honest with your family and friends, your community members, who you care for, and you assume they care for you too? Are you able to communicate, this is what I'm capable of doing with my responsibilities, this is my capacity to support? But this is an internal dialogue. This is an internal conversation, might be a better way to say that. And it might be one that you need to have with the people closest to you. These are difficult conversations, but they're unavoidable when we become responsible stewards of our money. Excellent question.
Next, we're getting into the fundamentals: budgeting, saving, investing, and debt. Also, some of the foundations of managing your money and building a stronger financial future. Here are some of the questions you asked. First question from Eric, 29 years old and based in Kigali. I'm a freelancer, so some months are really good and others are dry. When money comes, I spend because I'm scared it won't come again. How do you build financial stability when your income isn't stable?
This is an excellent question from Erica here in Kigali. And it's a difficult one to deal with. If your income isn't stable and you are looking to make a plan, you're kind of in between a rock and a hard place. So again, I would defer to building a structure. What you need is some kind of predictable source of income. Either what you're going to do is base your life within a realistic amount of money that you earn regularly, and then anything above that is going to go towards emergency funds, is going to go towards stabilizing yourself financially speaking. But you're living on a really tight rope and a tight budget, and usually that's quite difficult to do. So truthfully, the more realistic response is that you need to find a more stable source of income. And you need to find a way to reduce your expenses. So I hope that helps, but I know that a lot of us are earning inconsistent income from our contracts, from our short-term contracts, from our short-term jobs, gigs, things like this. But you can't be predictable with your spending if you're not predictable with your earning. So that is a tricky place to be in. And I hope that you find a stable way to earn and solve this problem once and for all, whether it is from your own business or the more permanent jobs that you can acquire. Great. Next question.
We have our first question from Aisha, 34, living in Kampala. I only started thinking seriously about saving 2 years ago. Before that, I was just surviving and helping family. Now I feel like I'm behind everyone: investments, retirement, and property. Is it too late to catch up, and how do I stop comparing myself?
So my response to Aisha would be, first of all, you have to stop comparing yourself to others. There's a common saying that comparison is the thief of joy. So don't compare yourself, primarily because you don't know what you're seeing from others that you're comparing yourself with is real. You don't know if it's true. And so we can spend a lot of energy trying to catch up, so to speak, with people who aren't even really where it looks like they are, or you don't know what they've had to go through to achieve what they've achieved. So comparison is a non-starter. It should be a non-starter. Don't compare yourself to others. I know how counterintuitive that sounds in our modern world, where Instagram and social media define almost what our lifestyles should be at certain points in life, or what everybody else is enjoying at different points in life, but it's not real. That's the thing that most of us just don't see. These social media lifestyles, they're not real for the most part. And if we continue to compare ourselves to what other people are doing, or what we can see is not real on social media, then we're going to just not be satisfied with what we have, which is the saddest part of the equation. You have so much, but you can't see what you have because you're comparing yourself to someone who looks, not who is, but who looks like they have more. So that was the first thing. The other thing I'd love to share is a quote from an author that I deeply admire called Jeff Olson. He wrote the book The Slight Edge. In it, he says that when it comes to changing the trajectory of your life, it's never too late to start. So you can get started at any point in life. It's never too late to start, but it's always too late to wait. That's his quote. So you can't afford to delay. Delaying is the greatest expense that you cannot repay. But that shouldn't make you feel that where you are right now is an inadequate time to begin doing something new. Because you now have time to structure how you use your money. You can organize how much you save, how much you give, how much you spend for your present needs, how much you invest. You can decide where to put that money. And you can decide to build these habits, not only for your own benefit, your own financial health, but also for all those who are watching you. Because habits are built internally, and those who are watching us, our children and grandchildren, those ones are learning from us. So what cultures are you building in your family for their continued success, even beyond you? It's never too late to start, but you cannot afford to wait. Every moment you wait, knowing what you should do, is money and assets left on the table, foregone, because you delayed. So, start. Your time is now, Aisha, but do not delay.
Second question from Linda, 28 and living in Kigali. I used a loan app during a tough period and now I'm juggling repayments. I feel embarrassed talking about it. What's the smartest way to clear debt without feeling like you failed at life?
Oh man, this debt issue, especially consumer debt, it is a huge issue to address. It's a huge issue to solve. And really what this is about, again, is discipline when it comes to taking debt, taking a loan, a credit card. Because if you take credit to consume, if you take debt to consume and you don't have the money in the first place, what are you going to do to recover the money that you've borrowed for consumption? I mean, you didn't even borrow to grow something, you borrowed to eat. Now, if you can't, find more work, if you can't, again, like in the example of in the example of Eric, Linda might need to really tighten her belt as well. You might need to live in an uncomfortable, maybe go back to your home if you're not living in your home, parents' home, or you're living with relatives. You might have to tighten your belt quite a bit to get out of debt. Otherwise, you're going to be living with the constant pressure that you have to pay back an amount greater than what you can afford. So you need to look at this problem from two ends. On the one end, you need to reduce how much you're spending just to stay alive, if possible. And you need to make sure that you are using as much realistically of the income that you do have to pay down your debt, especially if your debt is tied to some kind of asset or something that you own, or even just your reputation, which it always is. So this is a tough decision. It's a situation born from the way we use debt. And when you're in it, you kind of have to really struggle to get out of it. There is no comfortable answer. You're going to have to be in a tight leash regardless. But definitely you can help yourself by not making it worse and stop borrowing and learn how to live on a tighter financial schedule so that you can get out of this situation? Thanks for your question.
The second email we've received is from Patrick. He's 25 and from Kigali. He says, I've been saving money in my account, but people keep telling me I'm losing money to inflation. When do you move from saving to investing? And how do you know you're ready?
Well, if you're asking the question, you're probably ready. It means that it's troubling you. The reality is, I say it all the time, cash is milk. Cash is great, whether it's cash in your wallet, whether it's cash online, on your mobile money, whether it's cash in your bank account. It's milk. And this is what I mean. When you press fresh milk from the cow, you have this extremely nutritious drink. But milk doesn't last. If you keep it stored in your fridge somewhere around you for a couple of days, it will spoil. It's great to consume right away, but it doesn't store for a long time. The same thing with your money. Your cash that you earn from your employer or wherever you earn your cash from, it immediately starts to spoil if you store it somewhere. So what should you be doing to prevent your money from spoiling? And by spoil, I mean it suffers the consequence of inflation. Every year, your money can do less than what it could do the year before. That's just the reality of currency. So what should you do? Keep some of your money in a savings account. After the structuring that we talked about, the structured management of your funds, putting together a budget, the next thing you want to do is keep a certain amount of money in an emergency fund. An emergency fund historically is about 3 to 6 months of your needs budget, the things that you need to stay alive. And that's the only real reason to save in my book. It's just for an emergency fund. And that exists because life happens. And you need emergency funds. COVID happens, you lose a job, you need to survive X number of months to a year until you can find a new job or a new source of income. That's what the emergency fund is for. Other than that, your money needs to start growing. And if your money just stays saved up in a savings account, like seed in a silo, it's going to spoil. You need to store it up and plant it in a field. Plant it in a mutual fund. Plant it in a government bond. Plant it in international stocks. But it has to be planted. Listen, if you are troubled with the cost of inflation, the way you combat the cost of inflation is by compounding your money at a rate greater than the inflation rate.
Last question from Kelvin, 26, and also from Kigali. The moment my salary comes in, it's like it already has owners: rent, transport, food, and airtime. By the time I think about saving, there's almost nothing left. How do you build savings when your income already feels fully allocated?
Excellent question, Kelvin. It's as if he had preempted today's discussion topic before sending in his question. This is exactly what we've been talking about today. It does feel, Kelvin, it does feel that our money can be decided. Our income might be decided. It might at least feel that way, even before we get access to it. We have to pay our landlord or our mortgage. We have to pay for transport, food, all kinds of expenses and responsibilities. We might have debt that we need to take care of as well. And the reality is, as I mentioned before, the only money that's truly yours, Kelvin, is the money that you keep. And that's the reason why paying yourself first is such a critical concept. Setting aside money for yourself in advance of paying any of your other bills. Now, obviously, tax is going to go immediately before you even get your paycheck. The government is taxing your income. And you should even think about why that is. The government is paying itself first before allowing you to spend your money on your lifestyle. So why not do the same thing? Adopt the same structure is so critically important, because when you pay yourself first and then allocate that money to something that is productive, that can access additional income streams for you, then you're actually building something, you're implementing something consistent. But we want to do one thing at a time. So again, I would suggest listening to this episode. We probably have if you're come this far, but even more so, take this very, very seriously. Pay yourself first, introduce structure into the way you use your money, make it automated, 5%, 10%, 15% of your income, send it to a savings or investment account, and then spend what's left over. If you start by spending, there is never anything left over. So that might be helpful.
My name is Kevin. I'm 27 and I live in Nairobi. I have a decent job in tech and I earn more than I ever thought I would at this age. But somehow, by the 20th of every month, I'm broke. I don't even know exactly where the money goes. Food delivery, outings, small nothings. How do I build discipline without feeling like I'm punishing myself?
That's an excellent question. And it ties directly to the conversations that we've had on the show. What we were describing is structureless income. I make good money, but it goes places that I don't know exactly where. It might be going to clothes, it might be going to outings, it might be going to obligations with family. I don't know exactly where my money ends up. Here is the structural solution. You have to have a sense of balance. The Asians have this wonderful yin and yang concept. You have to have balance with your money. You can't be lawless and expect to progress and advance with your money. What I mean by lawless, you have X amount of money on your account and you're just going to spend it however you feel. Doing that means that you're a firefighter, you're a reactive money manager. How you handle your money in a structured way, set aside an amount of money you want to spend every month on having a good time. Set aside the amount of money you want to spend every month on family obligations. Set aside an amount of money you want to spend on your future. When you have these amounts or percentages of your income set aside each month, you no longer have to feel like you are on a strict money diet, so to speak. What you're doing is organizing your fun and enjoying responsibly. As they say on our responsible drinking adverts all over the place. Don't drink and drive, right? Arrive alive. It's the same concept with your funds. So you are going to have to be controlled. That's something that you have to accept. Control is a good thing. But make space for having a good time in your budget. Make space for planning for your future.
First question from Peter, 33, from Nairobi. I hear people say build an emergency fund first, but I also feel like I'm wasting time not investing. Which one should come first, and how do you prioritize?
This is a great question from Peter. Thank you very much. Emergency funds are critical. And I think I've mentioned before that when you are saving, there are really two reasons to save, like you've already alluded to. There's saving to invest, because you have to set money aside for investment purposes. And then there's saving for emergencies. The reason why saving for emergencies is so important is because if you can set aside in your budget 3 to 6 months of your needs, the spending on your needs, you've given yourself an opportunity to resist a crisis when it comes. And crises come for all of us, right? An unexpected bill, an accident, a family member who needs your support, and it's a crisis that you're responsible for in some way. These crises, when they arrive and we don't have an emergency fund, these crises cause us to go and eat off of immature investments. So you might have had a very beautiful plot of land that you purchased after saving out of money to invest in that plot of land. And then now that land is worth a few $1,000s and you sell it for a fraction of its value. You sell it for 20% of its value, 30% of its value, because you're in a hurry to get that money for a crisis. So we're killing our investments when we don't have an emergency fund. So don't feel like your emergency fund is a waste of time or a waste of resources. A fire extinguisher is not a waste of a resource. If you have a fire extinguisher in your house or in your car in your business, and you're driving and your car catches fire, and that fire extinguisher immediately solves that problem right then so that your car doesn't burn down, you're going to be thanking the heavens that you have a fire extinguisher, right? An emergency fund is a fire extinguisher. Don't feel like it's a waste. It's there waiting for a crisis, and when the crisis comes, the fire extinguisher is ready.
First question from Elvis, 23 and living in Kigali. I don't earn much yet, so I always feel like saving or investing is pointless until I make real money. Does starting small actually make a difference?
Oh yeah, that's that's really that's a hard one for most of us to wrap our minds around. Yeah, I mean, you don't earn, and you always feel like saving and investing is pointless until you make real money. That's a matter of order. In my point of view, it's a matter of order, because if you are not stabilizing your current financial position, and what I mean by stabilizing, I mean, do you have your basic needs met? Is your life, are you content? And now some of the concept of content is a matter of you appreciating what you have, and some of it is a matter of, are you earning enough to sustain yourself, right? There's a balance in between those two things, because your money does need to be used to help you stay alive, obviously. But staying alive alone isn't enough for the human condition. We need to feel a purpose behind our living. We want to feel that we are driving towards something. We want to also feel like we're enjoying the process, at least to some degree, enjoying that process of living. So some of your money is going to be spent on your survival. Some of your money is going to be spent on some level of enjoyment and purpose. But until you've got that sorted, investing and saving for the long term becomes a little bit redundant. And I'll say why. The reason why is because if you are saving, for example, trying to build an emergency fund, which is the first thing that we talked about in building a balanced structure to your income, if you're saving but you're not surviving, you're struggling to survive, then the first casualty of some kind of financial shock, the first sign of trouble, you're going to go after that savings account. Or even without trouble, maybe the first time you decide to emotionally spend, you're going to go for that savings account. Again, because you've not met your immediate right now needs. And without meeting those needs, your saving and investments are at risk, because you're going to go after them to meet your needs. So again, this is another reason why having an emergency fund is so critical. But even before having an emergency fund, you see, an emergency fund protects an investment account, right? Because in the event of an emergency, if you have your basic needs met, when an emergency comes, you use your emergency fund to solve the emergency. But if you don't have an emergency fund and an emergency comes, but you have investments, you're going to go after your investments to solve your emergency. However, if you're living in a constant state of emergency because your basic life needs aren't being met, then saving and investing becomes a non-starter, simply because you're not stable enough to sustain real saving and investment over time. So I'd start with establishing some stability in your income and your living costs. Find a way to cut your costs, find a way to live inside what you have, find a way to earn more stably so that you can start saving, investing, and building, right? Nobody can build without a foundation. And having a stable income, some form of stability, is where we start building from. Great question.
First question from Esther, 35 from Kigali. I've been trying to be disciplined, budgeting, saving, cutting back, but sometimes I get tired and just want to let go and enjoy life. How do you stay consistent without burning out?
Oh, this is a wonderful question. This first question about burnout. Look, I often say that saving and investing is a marathon, not a sprint. And the reasoning there is that if you save and invest, if you have an amount of money that you are allocating to saving and investment, if you do too much, if you run too fast, if you save and invest too much, you're calling burnout. You're inviting burnout because life is constantly going to happen. Things change. Your circumstances are going to be varied over time. And in order to maintain a habit of saving and investing, it needs to be a realistic amount, first of all, in order for you to maintain over change. So, one thing I'd say immediately to address the issue of burnout is to make sure that you are saving and investing a realistic percentage of your income 5, 10, 15% of what you make. Normally 10 to 15%. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say to this question is that if you don't have a target that you're saving and investing towards, maintaining your discipline, maintaining your position on saving and investing becomes much harder because you don't have a particular goal that you're after. So don't save and invest for the sake. Save and invest for a purpose. I want to be able to build my mother a house. I want to be able to afford this kind of wedding or holiday or education for my kids. If the reason why you are saving and investing is compelling enough for you, you will maintain that behavior despite your feelings. And that's what's going to prevent burnout. So that's an excellent question. There are many things that you could do, but those would be the top two. I'd say number one, have a target and a target that motivates you, that is compelling to you. And number two, save at a rate that is realistic and you can maintain despite change. Great question.
Second question from Eric, 32, from Kigali. After working hard all month, I tend to reward myself with expensive dinners, shopping, and trips. But those rewards are slowing down my financial goals. How do you enjoy your money without sabotaging your future?
Again, another wonderful question about balance. If your life is all about having fun, then you're going to have great memories and no resources for the future. If your life is all about the future, then you might not make it there because you're starving yourself in the process of trying to build a future. You need balance. And so, what balance looks like is a plan in your budget. How much money am I setting aside to go out and have those expensive dinners? How many of them can I afford based on what I need to invest in the future that I expect for myself, the future that I want for myself? If you're making these kinds of informed decisions, then you should be able to balance both what you can enjoy right now, going out maybe once in 2 weeks as opposed to once a week, maybe going out 3 times in a month, right? What that does is it allows you to have some fun, but not the expense of your future. And it also allows the opposite. You can plan for the future, but not by having no fun, no enjoyment right now, which is also not very sustainable. So the most sustainable approach is one which is balanced. Some fun, yes, not excessive, and planning for the future, yes, but not at the complete expense of enjoying your life right now.
Last question from Kelvin, 27, from Kampala. Every week I hear about a new investment: crypto, forex, SACOs, land, and stocks. It feels like I'm not part of something. I'm missing out. How do you avoid making rush decisions just because everyone else is doing it?
Oh, this one was going to touch so many of us. The fear of missing out. And the reality is that there's always going to be opportunities. Investment opportunities, opportunities to make money are always going to be there. And the reason is money is made because people are solving problems. And as long as humans exist, we will have problems. We will have ways that we are doing things that are inefficient, that can be made better. We can come up with new solutions. But human beings are always going to experience problems. And if somebody's out there fixing a problem, especially if it's a deep, significant problem for the people who experience it, then there's always going to be an opportunity to make money. What we should avoid as conscientious investors, as people who are mindful about the way we use our money, is that we shouldn't be looking to invest in things we don't understand. So understand what it is that you want to invest in. If you don't understand it yet, go out and learn it. Figure out what you want to do. Inform yourself so that you know the risks that you're taking. You're comfortable with them. You're comfortable with the amount of money you're putting into the investment. You understand how it's supposed to grow so that you don't panic during the experience of growth. And you can be around long enough to enjoy the benefits of investing in whatever this is. So today it's crypto, it's been Forex, there are savings groups like my own, there's a land that everyone wants to invest in. There are all kinds of benefits investing in stocks. But if you don't understand what it is that you're investing in and you rush in because everybody else, or there's so many people who are getting invested in this thing, or it's the hot topic of the month, listen, that's a real opportunity to lose money because you're not ready for the investment. The best thing you can do for yourself is get prepared, get informed, and then jump in both feet when you have a very good understanding of what it is you're doing, or find somebody who is qualified to give your money to so that they can make the decision. And of course, you'll pay them for that. But what you don't want to do is simply invest in anything just because you have a fear of missing out. You're anxious about missing an opportunity. That's not a good enough reason to get invested. Get your education in, information in, before you make a decision.
First question from Sandra, a human resources officer here in Kigali. I feel like every few months, I restart my finances from zero. I'll budget seriously for a while, reduce unnecessary spending, even save a little money. Then one emergency or stressful month completely throws me off course, and I stop tracking everything again. After that, I avoid checking my bank account too carefully because it makes me feel guilty and discouraged. How do you build financial consistency that survives difficult months and emotional setbacks instead of constantly starting over?
It's quite common for us to. I remember bringing up that I had a show on radio for a couple of years, and one show we did an anonymous survey of people who listen in, to asking anonymously, like I said, how long after payday does your salary get spent up, right? How long is your salary done after payday? And the vast majority said under a week. The vast majority, like over 95%, said under a week, 3 to 5 business days actually, and money is finished. So the feeling that every month you restart from zero is quite common. And also the fear of checking how you use your money is quite common, like you talked about, checking on your online banking. The reality is this is a mindset conversation. There are tools that you can use, but ultimately this is a mindset conversation. One of the great behavioral adjustments that our government uses to secure, our governments, not just ours, governments around the world, use in order to collect tax is automation, right? So most of us don't even know what our gross income is on our contracts. We don't even consider that our income, because we consider the money that hits our account every month as the net pay that we earn after paying taxes. We consider that the money that we actually have. And I'm a huge proponent of that attitude when it comes to saving. Automate the money that you're setting aside for your emergency funds, for your delayed spending, and for your investing funds, so that every month, even before the money hits your account, if possible, or as soon as it hits your account, 5%, 10%, 15% of your money immediately goes off to emergencies, investing, and delayed spending. What that does is that it allows you to set aside the money you have for planning and not mixing it with the money you have for spending, but it also allows you to sit in a mind space where you think to yourself, or you don't consider the money that you've saved as your current money. The money that is your current money is the one that's on your account, on your checking account. And this is a very, very helpful frame of mind to help you, like you've said, build financial consistency that survives just a couple of months. Automations, having a plan and then automating it, standing orders, automatic deposits, those kinds of things. They'll help you significantly. But when you're in the mind frame that this money I'm setting aside, this 5, 10, 15% that I'm setting aside, it is not for the current version of me. This is money set aside for my future self and my future self's obligations, my kids, my spouse, my community, whatever obligations those may be. I hope that helps because it has helped us immeasurably. Excellent question, Sandri.
Second question from Patrick, an architect based in Nairobi. I realize that most of my financial discipline only exists when I'm emotionally fired up after watching content, reading books, or attending seminars. But after a few weeks, real life takes over and the structure disappears. What are the practical systems someone should put in place if they want their finances to keep functioning, even during busy or stressful seasons?
Oh, this is a really good question, Patrick, as well, especially for those of us. I think I hear this question a lot from our listeners and clients who don't have a steady income. So for them, fluctuation in their monthly income is common, as opposed to some of us who are on long-term contracts and have a steady paycheck, who experience financial shocks based on the way we spend or gaps between jobs, right? It's a tough one because the solution, assuming that you make enough money to maintain your survival, right? That's the assumption. If you make enough money on a regular basis, where your rent is paid each month, if you have rent or mortgage, where your critical bills are paid, water, food, electricity, those kind of things, transport. When you have these basics managed, then, and the fluctuation is more in terms of how much money you have beyond your needs, then even more so being strict with your planning. Because what happens when you have a fluctuating income level, sometimes you have a lot of extra money and sometimes you're really tight. What you don't want to do, it's the same conversation we have about with business, managing cash flow to business. What you don't want to do is be in a situation where you have a lot of money and you spend a lot during peak season, using the business analogy, and then during the low season or the dry seasons of your business, you have nothing in the bank, nothing to support your business survival during the dry months. So the same concept of that Pharaoh's dream in Joseph's parable, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of drought. What do you do in the 7 years of drought? Well, you need to notice that during the 7 years of plenty, you can't just consume everything, because if you did, you're going to get nice and plump and fat like the fat cows. But in the time of drought, when there's no more harvest, you'll have nothing to consume. So build up your storehouse and set some seed in that storehouse to be dried and preserved and prepared for the 7 years of difficulty. So that same mindset, I would say, Patrick, where we're saying, now we're in a good period. This month was a good month. Let me set aside a tight budget of what I absolutely need and make sure that I get multiples of those tight months. On a random month, I make 1 million francs. That's a good month for me, for example, or $1,000, just to make it an international number. I have $1,000. I earn $1,000 in a random month, and it was a productive month. But then my normal day-to-day consumption each month, not day-to-day, month-to-month consumption is about $400. That's what I require for my day-to-day, my month-to-month. Well, what I want to do when I'm in a surplus is set aside $400 for next month in case next month is not as productive as this month, and keep doing that for at least 3 to 6 months so I build up my emergency fund. In a perfect world, 12 months of that $400, right? And whether it's a $1,000 budget or a $3,000 budget or a $5,000 budget or a $20,000 budget is irrelevant. The relevance is how much you are consuming on your basic needs each month and how many months of that basic need amount is stored up for you. That's what an emergency fund does. It also frees you up to not be so anxious. We can't afford to be careless with our money, especially in this economy, but we don't have to be so stressed out, so anxious, because that stress and anxiety by itself causes us sickness. It causes us demotivation. It causes us to lash out at people who are close to us, who are trying to support us, right? So in order to bring down that financial stress, I say it all the time when talking about financial stress, we need to have structure and emergency funds set aside so that we can be less anxious about what's going to happen in the future, right? So that's a first step. The next step is to start building an asset base or complementing your income so that you have not just maybe your business or your consultancy, but you also have some kind of cash flow coming in from different assets that you might not be working on your own, which is part of the reason why we have the investment club to begin with. So I know it's not a silver bullet, my response. It's going to take time and effort and discipline, but that is the way to solve the problem. Excellent question, Patrick.
First question from Diane, who works in project management in Kigali. My question is, how do you know whether your financial plan is realistic or whether you're just being too ambitious with yourself? Because every time I budget, I become extremely strict for a few weeks, then eventually I get tired and overspend badly afterwards. I'm starting to wonder whether the problem is my discipline or whether my financial plans are too emotionally exhausting to sustain long term.
Thank you, Diana. Exactly the question we're addressing today, right? How do you know that this is the structure that suits me? Well, first of all, let's not limit ourselves to the thinking that we have to build this one-time perfect structure for how our money is spent. But in the investment club, one of the things that we do with our culture building, our structure building with our money, is we try to frame, now one size doesn't fit everybody, but we try to frame what are the most important things that we need to do with our money, and then also frame what percentages we're giving to those important line items in our budget, for example. So one thing I'm a big proponent of is that your mortgage or rent should not be more than 30% of your salary. So if I'm making $1,000, I should not be spending more than $300 on rent or mortgage. But what that does is that, I'll give an example. I had a client a couple of years ago, I think I mentioned on a previous podcast episode, who was making in local currency about a million francs. At that time, it was closer to $1,000. A little bit less, maybe $800 around there. And that million francs that he was earning, about 450,000 of it was going to rent. And I use this example very often, of course, without disclosing who this person was. But spending 450,000 francs on a million franc salary immediately puts this person in the red. They're already in a financial crisis as soon as they've paid their rent, because they have very little money left over. They have 550,000 left over for the other expenses of life: food, water, shelter, clothing, school fees if he has them to pay, family support, let alone obligations to the community, to church if that's a thing. These are, his spending wasn't well considered when he got his home. And he got his home after he got his job, knowing how much he earned. So the question becomes, how much should you spend? Should I live where I'm living? Should I drive what I'm driving? Should I be doing what I'm doing with my money if I also intend to not only live within my means, reduce my financial stress that way, but also start planting some of my money so I'm creating value through investments that can feed me and those I'm responsible for, hopefully for a long time, decades, generations. So that becomes the cornerstone question. We don't have to make a perfect structure, a perfect budget with our money immediately. But we do need to have, in my view, a way that we prioritize and then allocate a percentage of our money for our priorities. Once again, coming from a point of view that you're not going to have absolutely everything that you want. $1,000,000, $1,000 is not enough to give you absolutely everything you want. So there's some things that you'll have to sacrifice, many things. But if you are also growing your money as you earn and consume it, then the reality of what you have available to you to spend and invest changes over the years, grows over the years. So that's why managing your money, having a culture, a structure, is so much more important than just relying on discipline and strict, tight discipline. Thank you for that. It's also important, Diane, to when you're building your structure, your budget, it's so important to allow for a bit of fun, for a bit of rest and relaxation, a little bit of unplugging, a little bit of self-care. Enough for you to recharge, but not too much to compromise other obligations that you actually absolutely must meet. So having a balance is something that you're going to walk into, you're going to live your way into, as opposed to having this perfect structure as soon as you start budgeting your financial life. I hope that makes sense. Excellent question.
We have our second question from Brian in telecommunications from Kampala. I've been waiting for the economy to become more stable before investing because I'm worried about putting my money into the market at the wrong time. Is it better to wait for conditions to improve, or should someone like me just begin anyway?
What an excellent question, Brian. When is the right time to invest in the stock market? Because volatility makes us feel nervous. From the nature of this question, I'd suggest that it might not be a very good time for you individually to invest in the market, in stocks. If you are considering volatility as a reason not to invest, I'd suggest that you might not be ready to invest for yourself yet. You might want to invest in your knowledge of investing. So your strategic approach to how to grow your money on the market. I'd say that would be the first place to go. Or take that money, if you're willing, take that money and put it in the hands of a trusted, regulated advisor or a fund manager, and have them manage it for you. Because a volatile market, an unstable market, is the reason why people make money on the market. Okay, is the reason why people who know what they're doing make money on the market. Okay, so what I'd suggest you do is that you might want to become more informed. One of the reasons that we could procrastinate when it comes to investing is that I want to know absolutely everything. And I often compare investing to learning how to drive a car, right? You don't have to, as a licensed driver of a vehicle, you don't have to know absolutely everything about an automobile in order to drive it and to operate it safely on the public roads. What you need to know is how to use a vehicle. You need to be licensed to actually use the core functions of a vehicle as a driver. So you need to know how to steer. You need to know the rules of the road. You need to know how to read road signs. You need to know how to manage speed and use your brakes and fuel the car and make sure the oil and the air in your tires or oil in your engine system, your engine system is lubricated. You need to know how to maintain a vehicle, and you need to know how to use it on the road. But you don't have to be a doctor, a car mechanic. You don't have to be able to build a car from scratch. in order to use a car. And I use this analogy as well when we're talking about investing. You don't need to know absolutely everything there is to know about investing, but you need to know how to safely navigate the markets productively. No, safely is not really the right word. Productively, constructively navigate, use investments to generate income. And that is like learning how to drive. So you can either have somebody drive you, like a fund manager, like an advisor, or you can learn how to drive yourself. You can have somebody teach you how to drive so you can drive yourself. So that's what I would say. I'd say don't rush into it. Investing is risky in the sense that if you are unsophisticated, uninformed, and your drivers are your thoughts about an investment and your feelings about an investment, but not technical analysis and understanding of the markets, then I would suggest that it would not be a good time for you to start investing just yet. I hope that makes sense. But a very, very good question.
We have our first question from Aline, who works as a project manager in Kigali. I earn what I consider to be a good salary, and on paper I should be in a much better financial position than I am. But somehow every month seems to end the same way. I pay my bills, handle my responsibilities, and by the time the next salary comes in, I feel like I'm starting from zero again. Why does this happen even when someone is earning a decent income, and how do you actually break that cycle?
Oh, this is, probably a question that everybody has. Excellent. I have a decent salary, but I still feel like I'm starting from zero. And that feeling comes from the fact that everything that you earn likely gets spent out each month. So each month you're getting paid, and by the end of the month or by the middle of the next month after payday, most of your money's gone. And so by the time the next paycheck shows up, you're likely entirely broke. This is a reality for the vast majority of my listeners. I would even venture to say it's a reality of the vast majority of the world. Now, the solution to that, the problem there, before we talk about solution, the problem there is that you're spending without a structure. The culture isn't embedded into the way you use your money. There might not even be any automations with your spending, except maybe loans that you're paying off. And so what needs to happen is that there needs to be a moment where you say this has to stop, regardless of how much you're earning and even your responsibilities. Responsibilities and how much you spend is important, but there's a layer before that. And that layer is, how am I directing my cash? To what ends? Which goals am I building towards? When you answer this question before you spend a coin, then you can direct the entirety of your income against what you are trying to achieve, rather than money coming in and going out based on what you're under pressure to pay, what you want, what you desire, what society is telling you you should be doing, what outside forces are influencing you. And that's really where this structure brings the confidence, clarity, and peace of mind we've been talking about in this episode. This is an excellent, very timely question. What are the things, first of all, how much money do you make? That's a question you answer to yourself. Then how much are you saving of that money? 10, 15% is what I generally recommend. Then what do you owe right now in terms of debt? What do you need to spend on survival and doing your job, right? Maintaining your survival. The absolute bare necessities of life. Rent, food, water, shelter, school fees, transport to and back from work, communication for the workplace, this kind of thing. Survival needs. And then how much are you going to set aside for stuff that you desire and supporting family members and enjoying the fruit of your labor? When you structure your money this way, when you give it this kind of culture and make sure you're spending based on these priorities, what must be paid for first? The food for the house should be paid for before, for example, going out and have a good time with friends. Now, going out and have a good time with friends is a great thing to do. It's great for us to decompress, to have a social life, to maintain our networks. But going out with your friends cannot supersede paying food for the house, right? because you have a good time out, but nothing to eat at home, especially if you have people depending on you. So this is the kind of structure that eliminates starting from zero every month. I hope that helps.
First question from Chantal, a finance manager here in Kigali. I actually earn a good salary, but I noticed that some people I know seem to keep building their savings and investments every year while I keep going through cycles. Some months I do very well, and then something happens and I use what I had built. What do people who consistently build wealth actually do differently from those of us who keep starting and stopping?
This is a very good question, Chantal. I mean, it's one that those of us who are in this spin cycle of constantly starting and then drawing down what we've built and then starting again and then being depressed or being discouraged, building up the energy and willingness to start again and then repeat the process. It can be quite draining. The answer is quite simple. When we have a spending culture, a structure for the way we use our money, when that becomes not what we are, not what we do, but who we are, part of who we are conscientious managers of our funds, then that's when this habit changes, this cycle changes. Because life again is always going to happen. There's always going to be circumstances that show up that derail your best laid plans. So what do you do about that? The first thing obviously is to acknowledge that shocks happen and prepare for them. But the second, and I want to say most prevalent problem that I've seen in the years that I've been doing this work, is that when these shocks happen, when these situations come up, a family member, a friend, an opportunity that you feel you can't live without, when these things show up, and we don't have a strict structure to process whether we should or should not get involved or how much we should get involved if we do into these circumstances, in these situations. Somebody's asking you for support. Should you be supporting them based on what? Is there a point at which you should say no? Is there a point where you should say, I can only do so much? When these structures don't exist in our day-to-day life, and I don't discount that this is very, very difficult to do, especially depending on how much your sense of community, your sense of contribution, your sense of togetherness is questioned by your either denying a request from someone or letting somebody know that you can only partially support them. These are the questions that need to be, these are the difficult questions that need some reflection, some soul searching, and some clear direction. Because when that happens, then you know whether you should or should not get involved in something that is derailing you from your plans. And that is a resilience we were referring to earlier in today's episode, but very good question. I know it's not easy to do, but it is necessary if we're going to be responsible managers of our finances.
And finally, we're looking beyond the numbers and into the psychology of money. How our relationships, families, experiences, and personal dilemmas can influence the way we think about and manage money. Here are some of the questions you asked us. Last question from Tracy, 26 and working in Kigali. Every time my salary increases, my lifestyle also increases. Better apartment, better clothes, and more brunches. I don't feel richer, just busier. How do you upgrade your life without upgrading your expenses?
So you just don't do that. I guess that's about as straightforward a question as you can ask. You can't upgrade your life without upgrading your expenses. It's two sides of the same coin. If you're going to elevate your lifestyle every time you get an increase in your income, then you're always going to be near broke because you made the equivalent of $500, 750,000 rand of francs, if we're talking the Rwandan context, and you're spending 80% of that on your lifestyle. And then your income doubles because you get a promotion, and now you decide to live in a house which is double your previous rent, and you are using a mode of transportation which is double the expense that you were using previously before your promotion. If that's your lifestyle, then you're always going to live near broke. Or, worst case scenario, you're living beyond your means, which many of us do actually. So what is the solution? The solution is a mindset shift. You are living a good life. And a good life doesn't necessarily mean all the newest what's its, the newest things on the market, the newest material possessions. A good life means balance between where you are right now and where you want to be in your financial future. If we don't keep an eye on this, what it means for us is that we're going to enjoy all our money today, and when tomorrow comes, we'll have an empty cabinet, empty cupboard, no food in the storehouse. And that is a very sad state.
Last question from Grace, 35, and living in Dar es Salaam. I've been working nonstop for years to build financial security, but I'm exhausted. When does chasing financial stability become unhealthy? How do you define enough?
Wow, Grace, what an existential question. When is enough enough? Or what is enough for that matter? Excellent question, Grace. This is something that we all have to determine individually. Some of us believe enough is retiring on a quiet farm by the lake and having a cup of coffee with a special one every evening, or going for a walk, and owning your own lake house or farmhouse. For some people, that's enough. And for other people, enough is non-existent, to put it simply. You need to determine internally what is important to you. And one of the reasons why enough becomes elusive is that we never take the time to sit down and ask ourselves what we really want. What is really important? Not just what would be nice to have, but what's really important to me. And at what point will I stop my hustle in order to enjoy what's really important? And we hear these conversations all the time. The most important things to human beings is relationships with significant others, with their family and children, with extended family members and friends, time spent in relationships. There's a lot of data out there about what's most fulfilling to human beings, and it tends to be relationships. But all of us have to make these decisions on our own. What I would suggest, sit down and write down what is important to you, how much it cost for you to get that, and what would make you satisfied. And focus on being grateful for that. Otherwise, the hunt can be endless. You will achieve and achieve and achieve endlessly and never really feel satisfied. So know what you want.
We have our first question from Joseph, 38, and living in Kampala. My wife and I both earn, but we've never fully combined our finances. Sometimes I don't even know how much she saves. Is financial transparency necessary for a healthy marriage, or is privacy okay?
This is an excellent question from Joseph in Kampala. I get it often when I talk to couples or families about financial transparency. It's a relational issue. Yes, this is finance, but this is about how you manage your relationship. I know that not one size fits all in all our different cultures and belief systems, but transparency is extremely helpful. You can prevent waste. You can prevent inefficiency when you're transparent. So if you have a goal as a couple, if you have a goal as a family, pooling all your resources and using them with transparency is going to help you get to your goal with more speed, with less stress, with fewer setbacks. So I do highly encourage that couples are very transparent with their finances, or at least transparent with their structure. And I expect that's what I do not only with my own family, but I expect that's something that will help Joseph in his circumstance.
Second question from Ruth, 29, from Kigali. I'm engaged and planning a wedding. The pressure to make it big is overwhelming. Family, expectations, social media, and reputation. We might even take a loan to make it happen. How do you decide between a dream wedding and financial peace?
Wow, Ruth, this is a very tough one. Family expectations, social media, reputation, all tied into your wedding planning with all the pressures that naturally has, is a tough one. And we live in a culture where it appears more and more that weddings are a statement of financial might and importance and relevance. So this is a difficult decision to make, and an important decision to make as a couple and as immediate family, especially those who are involved in planning your wedding, like your potentially your parents, siblings, your immediate family members, close friends. This is part of the decision-making structure that defines your relationship with money. Because frequently through life, you're going to experience situations where you might be pressured to pay for the appearance of something as opposed to the value of the thing. Because again, of the same things you've brought up, family expectations, societal expectations, reputation, backbiting, gossip in social networks, all these things. It's not an easy decision to make because it depends on, from a philosophical position, how you identify yourself and your household. In my home, we address this problem by letting people know, letting our family know that we're going to have a beautiful but in budget wedding. And whatever consequences that arises is just what it's going to be. Because we were adamant that we didn't want to have a very expensive wedding. The wedding wasn't cheap by any means, but we weren't going to have a wedding that leaves us broke or even worse, in debt. And that it just didn't make sense to us. It's not who we want to be as a couple. And I'm very grateful for my wife having this mindset with me. And we've gone through all kinds of financial struggles over the years as a couple, with having our children, with our family obligations as well. But having this identity right in the beginning has significantly supported our development as a couple and as a family. So I would encourage taking time to think about who you identify as a family, as you and your spouse, the family, the home you want to build, the culture you want as a couple. That is going to determine what sacrifices you can and cannot make in order to live up to that identity.
Second question from Sharon, 28, from Kampala. I'm in a job that pays well, but I don't enjoy it. I want to switch to something I'm passionate about, but I'm scared of earning less. How do you balance purpose and financial stability?
Oh, wow. This is a huge question from Sharon in Kampala. There is no one size answer for this question. Many of us do work that we don't enjoy for the sake of our survival, for the sake of those who depend on us. There is a different level of satisfaction in life and purpose when you do what you're passionate about. And I must recognize that working a job or having a career that is aligned with your passions and what your principles, and what definitely your principles should always be present even in your job, but your passions, things that are important to you, is a rich blessing. None of us should take that for granted. And I'm very lucky to be doing what I'm passionate about. Being able to manage the transition, however, from doing what you have to do to doing what you want to do is probably the trickiest part. Because if you go right after your passions without putting together a plan, you could find yourself in a self-made crisis. So patience and planning, support from people whom you trust, whom you think have a sharp mind to support your decision-making, and make sure that you are thinking pragmatically, not just with emotion and passion, is always helpful. But take your time. Excellent question, Sharon, and a difficult one for so many people.
Last question from Bruce, 27, from Kigali. When dating, there's always this expectation around money. Who pays and what lifestyle you must show. Sometimes I feel pressure to keep up appearances. How do you navigate dating without compromising your financial reality?
Bruce has touched on some fire. Who's responsible for payments when going on a date? What is the lifestyle burden? Wow, what a question. And also very, very much a part of our gendered conversation in the modern world. You're a young man. Are you responsible for all the bills? We live in an equal world. Why aren't we paying bills equally? This is a cultural question as much as it is in terms of the society you live in, but also in terms of the culture you have with the person that you're dating or talking to. Unmet expectations. It's one of the leading causes of relationship drama is unmet expectations. So one of the things you want to do right at the beginning, when you're talking to someone, dating someone, what are their expectations and what are yours? Can you come to a meeting of the minds? Can you be honest about it or not? And again, these are social conversations. I mean, obviously money is involved because this is ultimately about how money is used, but everyone needs to get in where they fit in. And I'd suggest to you that these are critical questions to have with someone whom you're planning on spending time with, maybe even spending your life with. What are your feelings? What are your expectations on this subject? And what are they really? Not what do you think they should be. What are they for you? What would make you happy? What would make you satisfied? What do you think is right? And then how do we live our lives around that? Because when you don't align on this issue, you're likely to land in a lot of problems moving forward. So I don't know if my answer is straight enough or direct enough, but there is no one size fits all. Sit down with someone and then build a relationship with someone when you're in agreement.
Second question from Paul, 37 and living in Kampala. I have a stable job, but I keep thinking about starting a business. The fear is losing my steady income. How do you know when it's the right time to take that risk?
Yeah, this is another fantastic question. Thank you for asking it. It's the same thing that my client that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode was talking about. She had a stable job, but she wants to buy a home, but is very worried about the potential of losing her job and what that could do to her loan, especially as an extended loan, 15, 20, 30-year loan, and you don't have that income that whole time, right? So she's worried about, if I take a loan, if I take a risk, particularly this is what this listener is asking about. If I take a risk like starting a business, like buying a home, and my income isn't steady, what's going to happen to me? Now, you are going to have to take risks. That's just a reality of life. Life is a risk. Taking a shower is a risk. Getting in your car is a risk. Going to work is a risk. Eating out is a risk. Having children is a risk. There's no life without risk. The question is, how do we contain these risks? What are we doing to manage them? When we have that settled, we'll become more comfortable taking risks. So just like a farmer on a farm, there's no guarantee that the farmer, when they plant their seed, they're going to get a harvest. There's no guarantee harvest will come. There's no guarantee tragedy won't happen. There's no guarantee that pests won't come or birds won't come in and eat their crop or other animals. So what farmers do is they protect their farm. They put their crops into, or they build greenhouses. They fertilize. They irrigate. They put up scarecrows. They do all kinds of things to protect the farm, to encourage growth in the farm, but there is no guarantee. In the same way with your money, you need to take risks that are managed, not completely prevented. That's not possible, but managed in an intelligent way, right? So there's a deeper conversation, but it's a great question.
Last question from Crystal, 25 and living in Kigali. I'm in a relationship where I'm more financially disciplined than my partner. I save, I plan, but they live more in the moment. It's starting to worry me long term. How important is financial compatibility?
Isn't this the truth? Yeah, I mean, isn't that the way all of us, everyone in a relationship, one person is a saver, the other one is a spender. It's like we attract our opposites. And that statement doesn't come from nowhere. That's saying opposites attract. It's very common that you'll have two people in a relationship. One is a planner, a saver, and the other one is a spender. What is important to do in a relationship when you're in it, you definitely have to do this. But even more importantly, before you get into a committed long-term relationship, we need to have a discussion about the way we use our money. We need to come to consensus because we're not the same. Even if you were both savers or both spenders, you're not the same person. So you don't have the same concept of saving and spending and planning. You don't operate at the same scale. So what is very, very important to do is sit down and have a very clear conversation, coming to minds, a meeting of minds about what you want to do with your money, right? What's our priority? We want to build a home. We want to retire early. We want to put our kids in these kinds of schools. We want to live this kind of lifestyle. Now, your resources, most likely for everyone on earth, your resources don't meet everything you desire to do. So you have to prioritize. Without having this conversation, you're likely to run into conflicts, very preventable conflicts, because you didn't discuss what you expect. And I think, again, one of the greatest reasons for relational and marital conflict is unmet expectations. We can't meet expectations if we don't discuss them. So your first step to resolve this long-term worry is to discuss and build a plan together, one that takes into concessions because you're not the same person. You're different. Your relationship is two different people. You need to come to some kind of agreement about what to do so that you can move forward. That's how you deal with that stress. Alternatively, have this discussion before you get into a long-term relationship so you can make a decision about whether it's a right fit. And we should be doing that not only about money, but about everything critical in a relationship. Faith, family, culture, lifestyle, habits, all these things need to become part of that conversation. I hope that helps.
Last question from Noble, 28 and living in Kigali. Sometimes I spend money just to maintain a certain image, clothes, places, and lifestyle. I know it's not sustainable, but I also don't want people to think I'm struggling. How do you detach your identity from money?
Coincidentally, this question is the topic of our next episode of the Money Blueprint podcast. And yes, maintaining appearances can be very, very costly. But like I mentioned with the previous question, every time you choose to do one thing with your money, you're choosing not to do something else, right? You're sacrificing something in order to do another thing, right? So if a large percentage of your income is going towards appearances, your clothes, the places you're seeing, the lifestyle that you lead, the car that you're driving, if a significant portion of your income is going to that element of appearance, and particularly if this is the income that you're spending straight from your job and not exactly money that's coming from assets that are making money for you, then you're sacrificing your wealth for appearance. You're sacrificing an opportunity to invest for an opportunity to spend, right? And by the way, your effort to make appearances look good might not even impress the people that you're trying to impress. It might have no effect at all. It might also have a negative effect. So my position, and again, all of us have to come to our own philosophical position on what is an appropriate use of our money. All of us have to come to this position on our own. But it's better to come to this decision when you have all the information and you're weighing options with all the possible information available. This is why I'd suggest that it might be better for anybody to invest their income, especially their salaried income, in owning things that generate more money for you. And when you have multiple income streams, money coming from assets, and then you invest some of that money in appearances, that's a better approach, right? Money, income from your salary first going towards survival and asset acquisition, buying and controlling assets. And then if you want to spoil yourself, money from your assets can do it. Great question.
Last question. Hi, Isaac. My name is Jean Claude, and I run a small business in Mosanze. One thing I struggle with is the psychology side of money. Every time I make a financial mistake, I become frustrated with myself and then I delay fixing the situation because I feel ashamed that I should already know better by now. So instead of correcting things quickly, I avoid them until the situation becomes worse and I have to restart financially again. How do you stop guilt and disappointment from turning into long-term financial avoidance?
Oh wow, Jean-Claude, what an emotional question. I'm sure it resonates with so many people. The guilt that comes from long-term financial avoidance when you know you should have been doing better and you haven't, but now it's kind of like you're constantly feeling maybe a sense of blame, of conviction. You're being convicted. You're convicting yourself negatively that I'm not capable. You're probably talking down to yourself or allowing these intrusive thoughts to tell you that you're not capable. This is a significant issue, I imagine, for a very large portion of our listeners and just the public in general. One of the reasons why I think accountability is so useful is that, first of all, accountability and accountability groups, what they do is they normalize some of these deep, dark fears that we think are just about us, right? So this is not really a money question as much as it is a psychology question, or how you manage problems, how you manage negative self-talk, how you manage upsets and failures. Because an internal monologue. Because if you're on your own when you're dealing with these financial pressures, when you're dealing with these feelings of failure, then it's much easier for these dark thoughts or these condemning thoughts to overrun your thinking and maybe even convince you that you are not worthy or you're not capable. The reality is these are problems. I mean, from the years that I've been doing this, these are problems that this is a guilty feeling that transcends all income levels, all professional levels, you know, uh, all socioeconomic levels, because we are human and we fail. The issue isn't your failure. The issue is your reaction to failure. And so when we have an accountability group, when we have a community where we can feel honest and open enough on this financial matter to say, hey guys, I'm dealing with this. Has anybody else dealt with this? How have you resolved it? Has anyone resolved this? How can we resolve it? How can we, put this problem out in the open and shed some light on it so it stops attempting to make us feel worse than we should? Again, because feeling bad doesn't have a function unless it motivates you to make positive change. Otherwise, feeling bad for feeling bad's sake isn't useful. It doesn't help you and doesn't help the people who rely on you, who look up to you. So change, a new direction, a new way of addressing the problem so that it gets resolved is the only benefit of looking back and feeling like you could have done better. That's the one benefit. Not going back to that, changing the way you deal with it. That's the benefit of looking back and reflecting and noticing that you could have done better, right? Not even necessarily feeling bad, but noticing that you could have done better. And so what I would suggest, in addition to organizing yourself, is to find a group, join our investment club, but find a group of people whom you can be accountable to for your financial progress so that we can normalize the process of falling down and getting back up. That's ultimately the resolution. Excellent, deeply convicting question, Jean-Claude. And I hope that you find that solution fast.
Second question from Moses, a sales rep in Kampala. One thing that really resonated with me is your point about decision fatigue. I feel like I make financial decisions all day long. Transport, lunch, family requests, emergencies, and bills. And by the end of the month, I'm mentally exhausted and stop caring about the budget completely. What are some simple ways someone can reduce financial decision fatigue without becoming too rigid or too robotic with money?
This is a great question. Thank you very much for it, Moses. I think that one of the ways that we address this constant decision making fatigue that we experience is by automating. Aside from setting a culture and budgeting our monthly income, figuring out what is a priority to you, what is absolutely non-negotiable, and automating your money towards those priorities. What that does is, first of all, it takes the money away from you, the cash, the liquidity, it takes it away from you and puts it towards your priorities. That's what automations do. Because you have a standing order for rent, and maybe for monthly payments on your kids' education, the school fees. You might have monthly installments on a mortgage, if that's so. When you have these monthly standing order installments, then the money isn't available in your account for you to kind of figure out what to do with it. So it takes away the anxiety of, first of all, spending your money erratically, like without a plan, and figuring out later in the month that there's something that you missed, right? That can cause a lot of stress. But on top of that, every day being bombarded with, should I spend my money on this or should I spend my money on that? You have answered that question when you automate, because you've prioritized what you want to spend your money on and sent the money to those priorities without this constant month-to-month questioning. So that's what being determined, definitive about how to use your money will do for this decision fatigue element. If you set a culture, set a budget, and then send your money automatically to those priorities, then you have fewer decisions to make. You have less money available to you for you to try to figure out where you should put this money. Like when people ask you to support, or if they have a project for you, or this outside influence coming into your mind and into your budget is addressed because you've already prioritized and sent the money away. I hope that helps. Fewer decisions will make it so that you have less financial fatigue or decision-making fatigue. Excellent question.
First question from Kevin, an IT specialist in Kigali. I consume financial content almost every day, but I still haven't started investing consistently. My question is, how do you know when research and preparation have crossed the line into procrastination disguised as responsibility?
That's an excellent question. If that sense of feeling that I'm speaking to you directly, if that creates change in the way that you grow your money, then I'm glad. But the question about when to know that research is becoming debilitating, or when you're overthinking, because we've talked about this subject before, of overthinking. Procrastination has a cost. If you know that you have spent many months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, most likely for many of us listening, years, thinking about what you'll invest in, thinking about where you might invest, procrastinating on taking action, then that's likely where you feel personally convicted by this topic. So what I would suggest you do need information. Learn about a simple structure that you can use, as I've mentioned in this episode. A simple structure that you can use on investing. Local products available to you on the market. Capital markets, if there are companies listed. Learn a little bit. Talk to a broker. And I'm pretty sure, depending on where you're listening from, brokers provide information on stocks available in your market, if they are. Have a moment, take a moment to learn about these. Find a reputable, an individual influence, a financial planner, or a voice on social media, one that is credible, and listen in for a few weeks, and then take action on a simple first step. Like I said earlier, open an account. right? Set an amount of money from your budget that you can set aside for investment activities, a realistic amount that won't break your back in terms of how you've managed your monthly income, but is sustainable and it will grow over time. And then be patient. Don't rush for returns. That's one of the things that causes us so much anxiety with our investing, is that we're looking for the best, the absolute highest return, which comes with potential risks. And for many of us, a lack of knowledge about how these investment works. Don't look for the fastest growing. Look for what you're comfortable with, what risk profile suits you, right? A fund, a unit trust, um, a state bond, a government bond. Find something that you can invest in and rest easy and start. Over the next year, what have been your gains? How have you improved? How has your account improved? And what else could you potentially invest in? This is how we evolve as investors, not through perfection, but through action. Excellent question.
We have our first question from Claudine, a pharmacist in Kigali. I've wanted to start investing for almost 3 years now. I've attended workshops, watched videos, and even opened an investment account, but I've still never made my first investment. Every time I'm about to start, I feel like I need to learn just a little bit more first. My question is, how do you know when you're being responsibly cautious versus simply procrastinating?
Perfection debilitates, that's what we're talking about this week, but also failure to launch. Analysis paralysis is what we talked about in one of the questions I answered last week or the week before, I can't remember. Thank you very much, Claudine, for the question, but you need to jump in at some point. And especially when you're starting to feel like you're almost there, but you're at the riverbank's edge, you're at the pool's edge, and you've dipped your toe in the water, but you realize you're not actually getting in. Find something really simple, right? So don't go after the most complex, the highest rate of return, the most ideal investment opportunity. Let's leave perfection alone and let's get, what can you do now? Let's get to that. What can you do now? You've opened a brokerage account or you've opened an investment account somewhere. Talk to your banker, talk to your broker and say, look, I would like to buy some bonds. That's not something that should take significant cognitive load. Your bond, whatever bond that you're buying, you're lending money to a government or corporation that is going to pay you back plus interest. You've become the bank. Go ahead and, if it is a contract that you believe in, if it's the kind of bond that you can stand behind, and an amount of money that you will not perish if that contract doesn't work, start. It's simple enough. It's straightforward enough. It's a contract that you believe in. It's a relationship that you believe in. Dive in. Start with that. Put your money in a fund, having other professionals who manage it for you, and get some return on that, a 10%, 11%, whatever it may be. Where you have professionals managing strong, reputable stocks and bonds, and they manage it for you, and you get a return at the end of a year, for example. That's something that somebody else is managing on your behalf, but you are in it. You've started moving. You're doing something. That will propel your confidence significantly because you can truly adopt the identity of investor. You actually own bonds. You actually own funds, units in a trust. So start with something simple, but start. Excellent question.
We have our second question from David, who works for an international NGO in Nairobi. One thing I struggle with is the feeling that I started too late. I'm now in my mid-40s, and every time I look at investment examples, I see people who started in their 20s. Instead of motivating me, it actually makes me feel discouraged because I keep thinking about the years I've already lost. How do you move forward emotionally when you feel like you've already missed your best opportunity to build wealth?
That's an excellent question, and I'm pretty sure that there are other listeners who are hearing Ian talk about how, David, you're in your 40s and you feel like the time has passed. And when there are people in their 50s and 60s and 70s who might call you a very young man, okay? Opportunities come and go every day. There's a quote from an author that I deeply respect, His name is Jeff Olson. His name is Jeff Olson. And he writes a quote that I use regularly. In his quote, he says, when it comes to changing the trajectory of your life, the direction of your life, when it comes to starting something new, when it comes to investing in your finances, in your health, in your education, in your relationships, it's never too late to start. I love this quote so much. He says, it's never too late to start. And then he continues to say, it's always too late to wait. It's never too late to start, but it is always too late to wait, meaning that you're not too old to take an advantage of an opportunity. But we are always too old to allow opportunities to pass us by when we're informed. Now that you know, do not wait. Don't lament what has passed. The time that has passed is gone. Be an example of what to do from where you are today moving forward, because you can do so much alone and even more together. Be the example. And you'll be surprised how much you can achieve in the next 5, 10, 15 years, David. So I would say to you, don't worry about what's past. Opportunities are coming all the time, and will continue to come. As long as human beings exist and we have problems, opportunities will exist. That's just how the trade of value works. Problems, solutions, people who consume them. That's it. So as long as human beings exist, and as long as problems exist, and problems will always exist as long as humans exist, then opportunity will be there. The question is, have you put yourself in the right mind frame? Have you organized a culture around your spending and investing? Have you structured your savings? Have you structured your life and your discipline in a way to take advantage of opportunities when they come? And most of us, unfortunately, at all age levels and professional levels, socioeconomic levels, education levels, so many of us, the vast majority of us, are not prepared. Excellent question. Go ahead and move with the confidence that opportunities are there.
We have our first question from Diane, a procurement officer in Kigali. I've had enough money to start investing for a while now, but every time I'm about to commit, I start imagining everything that could go wrong. I know that staying in cash isn't helping me either, but I still hesitate. How do you know when caution is wise and when it's simply fear holding you back?
Oh, what a difficult question to answer, Diane. Very, very good question. Thank you for sending it in. How do you know the difference when fear is what's driving you as opposed to caution and being intelligent? So risk is all around us. I think that might be at the core of this particular question, right? You've set money aside. You know you want to invest. The money is there, but I'm worried when I start investing about the things that could go wrong, which is fair enough. I mean, because things can go wrong and they will, right? Because no progress, no growth is linear. It's just a straight road up from where you are right now to where you want to be. It's not like life doesn't work that way. Failure is part of the process, and any success you've ever had in your entire life up to this point has failure baked in. First time you learn how to walk, when you first learn how to talk, when you started learning a new language, when you started riding a bike, swimming, bathing yourself, cleaning yourself, taking on responsibilities, anything, taking on a job, school, any success you've ever had has failure baked into it, because failure is part of the process of learning. The particular issue we have here about fear and risk with our money is that we don't want to lose any. I've invested X amount of money and I don't want to lose a coin. Unfortunately, that's also not realistic. You're going to lose some, but the goal is to win many more than you lose, right? That's the objective. What I would suggest is, again, like I mentioned to one of our listeners last week, start with something. Put your money in a unit trust or a mutual fund, or a portion, not everything. Keep some money for an emergency fund that you will need in the event of a financial crisis or a financial shock. learn more, invest in understanding how investing works, right? So sharpen your mind and then engage the task. So invest in learning, right? Invest in learning before you invest in investing. Invest in assets, I mean. I think that's a way to address that. I think when you set some money aside for emergencies, you put money in some of your money into a unit trust or mutual fund, something which has more stability, but again, there's nothing which is bulletproof. No investment exists which has absolutely no risk. No element of life exists without risk. So I'd say that, and then there's an emotional conversation as well to have with you yourself, with trusted loved ones, with trusted advisors. Look, you're not going to win every risk you take. It's not going to happen, and there needs to be an emotional acceptance of that if we're ever going to be successful with investments. Um, just as it's true with any opportunity you take at work, with relationships for that matter, just because that young man asks you to go on a date with him doesn't mean he's going to succeed. But should we stop asking? And there might be some some groups in the public in our communities who might agree that men should stop asking girls on dates, ladies on dates. Um, but that wouldn't be constructive for the interests of pairing up, right? Asking doesn't mean you're going to succeed. Trying doesn't mean you're going to succeed. But never trying guarantees you will fail, right? So there's an internal conflict to deal with around the fear of failure, the fear of a misstep, the fear of losing some money. These things can happen, but they aren't the end of the world if you're organized, if you're structured, and if you're learning as well as allowing informed, trusted advisors to guide your steps. That's the way to go. But you will fail, and don't worry. Fail small and grow. Hopefully that helps. Thank you for this question, Diane.
Second question from Patrick, a civil engineer from Dar es Salaam. A few years ago, I lost money in a business venture with friends. Since then, I've become very hesitant to invest in anything at all, even though I know I need to build assets for retirement. How do you rebuild confidence after a financial setback without becoming reckless?
Ooh, how do you get back on the horse? That's an excellent question, Patrick. How do you get back onto a journey when you've been injured? How do you start building the confidence in yourself to put yourself at risk again? I think I'll tie this to what I mentioned to Diane earlier in her question. Excellent question, both of you. First of all, investing with family and friends can become a problem. And I understand that is something that all of us do, but it's more of a not a problem in principle as much as it is a problem um, in practice, how we engage investing with friends and family, with people that we are close to. Because it can become, not it doesn't, not naturally, but it can become difficult to manage the difference between we're friends, we're brothers, we're family members, we're we're close, but we're also in business together. So we're following rules. This is not casual. This is serious. And crossing those lines or keeping those lines clear can become difficult depending on the nature of the people involved and the relationship between them. What I'd say, again, this is now a personal decision more than anything else. What I'd say is that when you've been injured, do an assessment of what happened. Do they call it in the medical field an autopsy. What's the reason why this failed? What are the contributing reasons? There are probably multiple. And allow what you find out objectively, because partnerships don't fail because one person was just entirely irresponsible and at fault. Partnerships, opportunities fail for a combination of reasons. What were they? And what did you contribute to that? Either in the decision making or in the execution. How did you contribute to that failure? Because that might help. And then the other thing is that not all investment means starting a business at all, let alone with family and friends. a lot of investing could be in existing assets. It could be in in existing businesses, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that when you're investing you have to start a business. So explore that, learn more. I think always that's a support, a boon to building confidence and to understanding the nature of this thing that we call investing is to learn. Spend some time reading, listening in, and having conversations with um, trusted mentors, people who have been where you want to go, or have been on the journey that you're on, but are further ahead than you and can advise you. Trust them to advise you. This would be useful, right? But in the end, it's a matter of you failed, you got hurt, come to a balance about it, come to an understanding, an emotional balance about it. Understand why it happened, understand how you contributed to that happening, and come to a mental state that you understand why these things happened, or at least to a degree, and then make some changes. But you still have to take the initiative to act. Otherwise, you stay where you are. So, this is not an easy thing to do. It is much harder done than said, but I'd suggest that that's one way to accomplish that.
And that brings us to the end of our Season 1 wrap-up. Thank you once again for being part of the Money Blueprint journey. Thank you for listening, watching, sharing, and sending in your questions. Follow us across our social media platforms for more conversations, insights, and money-related content coming your way. We'll see you next time in Season 2.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope that today's conversation has given you some of the tools that you need to create the life you want with your money. If you have any questions you'd also like answered, feel free to send them to our email, themoneyblueprintpodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on our social media platforms. Have a great week.
This podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only, and does not provide financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. Do not make decisions before consulting a qualified professional. This podcast is brought to you by LF Media, home of great African podcasts.